recording. That you've got to go. Even Nancy, if you've got to go, I can literally run the lesson basically myself, like
Yeah,
just
that's
with
true.
pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to have people, obviously, because I like to ask people questions and get the interaction. But I want to make sure that the recording is available for everyone to view today. So, Nancy, if you need to step out or do something, don't worry about it. I will just.
Today is not as crazy. You have my undivided attention for this session. I've been overseeing construction project at my neighbor's.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so you've both been busy. Okay, let's jump in. Okay, so um, let me share my screen.
It's
Okay,
not
so
elaborate, Suzette. It's matter of opening the door for the
Oh,
contractors.
I was impressed that your
No,
neighbors were trusting you with oversighting their construction.
no, it's deferred maintenance.
Got
The
it.
house can go up for sale.
Mm.
okay, so Suzette, you'll remind me. So your pictures were the two turtles. You can see them on here. Can
The
you?
two turtles, the turtle group, the tulips,
Uh,
and the black and white lichen right above the web.
Okay.
number six. There we go. So these four, right?
Correct.
Perfect. Let's start with them. So the theme this week was difficult, was intentionally vague, because I want to start pushing this group more than just saying texture, lines, roses, lay flats, whatever. And you'll see in the upcoming classes, we're going to learn quite a few new techniques. I'm going to really accelerate what we've been doing. There may be some going back and reinforcement, especially for people who have questions on some of the stuff that we covered so far. But there's a ton of new, both primarily post-production techniques, but I'm also going to touch on some new in-camera techniques that you may or may not know about. Um, so kind of if the trajectory was kind of like this, it's going to become a bit more like we say hockey stick growth. So we're going to go over the next six classes, which is exciting. So if you guys here today, if I talk about anything and it's not clear, if it's going over your head, if you're not sure, please just ask me a question. This is great. We have three of us here. It's really easy.
Well, I would like to say that I had all kinds of ideas for the growth concept, but I never really got to the things that I thought would be kind of funny,
Go on. So what
you
kind of
know,
things are you thinking of?
like shoes that weren't fitting somebody, like,
Mhm.
somebody standing up against a ruler, with a side profile in black and white of how tall they're getting or
Yeah.
something of that. I mean, I had all these kind of, oh, I could do this, I could do that, but anyway,
Did
be
I
that
did
as it
this,
may.
I did this theme a number of months ago for a different group, and someone sent in a really interesting picture of three generations of hands.
Oh
So they had
yeah, that would be
Oh,
cool.
so they had
I
like
thought about hands, about my little granddaughter's hands, but I didn't think about doing three at a time. That's a good idea.
and they did it right up against the window in black and white. It looked
Oh,
beautiful.
cool.
Had like the
oh,
baby's hand, the mother's hand, and the grandmother's
Yeah,
hand, like all
very
together. It
cool.
was yeah, and stuff like that is a storytelling picture. So growth you can take very literally. And I would expect when I set this, the majority of people to send me pictures of flowers growing, especially in this,
I knew you'd expect that.
which you can see, like some people did, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But often the themes I don't want to be interpreted so literally. I want them to be like creative. I want you to think out the box, and all those suggestions are definitely strong, Suzette. So let's jump in and let's take a look. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on your four photos here, so we can give you really nuanced feedback. So I'm just looking at. Can you get? I should make sure that you can see my drawings. Let's make sure you can see this. You see my pink circles?
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great, great. Good. Okay, let me make that a little bit bigger. So, remind me, Suzette, what camera you use?
I was using a Nikon this
Yeah.
day.
Which one?
Uh, don't ask me such complex questions.
Don't worry, I can
It's a
probably.
Nikon D7100.
Okay, great. Yeah, good. Okay, so one thing that's interesting about that lens and camera combination is you may or may not know, but in digital photography, and this is relevant to probably people on the recording as well, is there's now two types, or well, I would argue there's even three types of digital camera. There's mirrorless, which is a camera which has no mirror in it, which means
And
it's
I have
white.
one of those too. I have a Sony
Yeah,
mirrorless.
and this is why it's good for you to know the difference. Now, your Sony mirrorless will be what's called full frame. So you may
Right.
have heard that expression before.
Yep.
And what that basically means is when the light is coming through your camera and it's coming through like this, the entire sensor is exposed to light. So you're using the entirety of the sensor to take your picture. With your D7100 or any camera that's not a full frame camera, and I know there's people on this group who have Sony's, Canons, Nikons that aren't full frame, which is why I want to talk about this, is when the light comes through the camera, not the whole sensor is being exposed to light. You basically lose some of it. It doesn't reach over here. So if I draw it this way, it's kind of easier to understand. If this is looking at your sensor, you basically only get the light in the middle of my yellow circle.
Oh, interesting.
It doesn't get to the edges. Now, what that means in the real world, it's good to know the theory, but what that means in the real world is when you have any lens on a camera that is not full frame, is you have something called a crop ratio. We have what's called a 1.4 crop ratio, which basically means that almost 40% of your sensor is not being used. It doesn't matter. You don't notice it. In fact, you may notice if ever you put on the wrong lens that you'll see that there's black vignetting around the outside. And that's because you're putting the wrong lens with the wrong camera. But what is really interesting is because of the whole sensor, and maybe actually let me pull out my diagram again, make it really clean. So light, when it comes through, we're going to talk about light a lot today. Light, when it comes through the camera, spreads. Okay, so it goes like this. It spreads out. It gets wider and wider. If your sensor is not seeing as much of the light, the spread is going to be narrower. It's not going to be as wide. So what that means is when you have a zoom lens, Suzette, like you've got here, and we see here that this is zoomed to 140 millimeters, that's actually not 140 millimeters. If you stood here side by side with your Sony and you stood side by side here with your Nikon, and you had the same lens basically on each camera, and you zoom them both to 140 millimeters, the Sony one is not going to be as zoomed in as this one. The Sony one will actually be 140 millimeters. This, what we're looking at here, is closer to like 220 millimeters. You basically have like, sometimes we call them like extenders, but you have additional zoom in your
Yes,
lens that you
I know
didn't know
about those.
was, yeah, but you have that without having the piece of equipment.
Interesting.
So
I
so
did not know that. That is really interesting.
it's really interesting, and there's an upside and there's a downside. The upside is you can zoom in on things without having a big heavy lens. So you get more zoom, you can get closer to stuff without spending an extra $1,000 or $2,000, $5,000 and having a humongous heavy lens. The downside is if you bring this to the wide end to 70 millimeters and you're trying to take a picture of all your grandkids in a group and you can't get them all in the
Oh,
picture,
all right.
it's not actually 70 millimeters. It's more like 110 millimeters. So DX cameras or not full frame cameras, like wildlife photographers love them. Macro photographers love them. Floral photographers love them most of the time because it means we can get closer. But portrait photographers and landscape photographers, most of the time, you have to be wary of them because you can't get as far back as you like. Let's say we were looking at, I don't know if anyone here sent me a landscape this week. Let's have a look. Even if we were looking at this, right? This wasn't taken if this wasn't taken on a full frame camera. Sorry, this wasn't taken. This was taken on a full frame camera. It wasn't taken on a camera like your Suzette's. But if you had had the exact same 42.8 millimeters, yours would have been much closer on your Nikon than this. But maybe there was a cool other zebra lying here and there was a big sunset, you wouldn't be able to get that in. Takeaway being, Suzette, is if you go somewhere and you know you want to do landscape photography, take your Sony.
Okay.
And if you go somewhere and you know that you're going to be doing, you're going, let's say you're going to the zoo with your grandkids, then the Nikon would be a better option for you to take because it's going to allow you to get close in on the zebra, the elephant, the rhino, whatever you're seeing at the zoo. And most people don't realize that in
Well,
terms of,
I would not have been able to explain it, but I did take my Sony on the same walk that I ended up taking these pictures. And I was very disappointed in what I was trying to get photos of because I couldn't get close enough to them because it's actually called a swamp, and but it's in the city. It's an urban swamp area
Uh-huh.
here at the Center for Urban Horticulture, and I just couldn't get close enough with
Yeah,
my Sony without putting on my mega lens, which I didn't really want to take on my casual walk. So,
exactly. So now you know why. So now you know why, and hopefully that will help you in situations where you're going somewhere and you think, I'm going to photograph one of my grandkids' sports games. I'm just making something up. Take the Nikon
yeah.
because it's going to give you that extra zoom. The other, just while I'm talking about full frame and not full frame cameras and having an upside or a downside, is the big upside. The reason why full frame cameras, mirrorless cameras are an upgrade is because if we say this one's the full frame and this one's the not full frame, is the full frame, because the light is exposed across the whole sensor, you are using all the megapixels available. So you get a much larger picture, much more detail, much more dynamic range. Nancy, remind me, what does dynamic range mean?
Variations in darkness and lightness.
Good.
Thank
Um,
you.
and so
Oh, I didn't know. Did she ask Nancy? I
I
thought
did
you
ask
asked.
Nancy, but don't worry.
I'm sorry, Nancy.
That's okay.
So,
Sorry.
so don't worry. So imagine this is, I'm just going to make something up. This is 30 megapixels, and they're both 30 megapixel sensors. On the full frame one, you are getting the full 30 megapixels, which is also helpful if you want to crop in on it afterwards. If you want to like just take a portion of it, then you've got more to work with. When you lose the bits on the side, which you do on every camera that is, and full frame cameras have not, especially in the digital era, they didn't exist at the beginning when digital came out 25 years ago. So this, instead of being 30 megapixels, is probably closer to like 22. Now, that doesn't sound a big difference, but if suddenly you cut out 90% of the frame, this one you're left with like, and you've only got 10% left, this one you're left with 2.2, and this one you're left with 3. That's a big difference in terms of how the picture looks. And as a reminder, again, something you may see pop up as you're working around Lightroom or Photoshop is when we talk about megapixels, you'll often see the letters PPI. Anyone got any idea what that may mean? Go for it.
Pixels
Pixels
per,
per inch.
Good, you both knew it. Great. So, so pixels per inch just means if we got our magnifying glass out and we looked at a little square inch of our thing, how many pixels are packed in each square inch? The more megapixels, the better. And that's when we export out of Lightroom, and we usually say, do we want high resolution or do we want low resolution? We usually say for high resolution, we want 300 PPI. That's industry standard. And if ever GCA or someone says to you, Suzette, Nancy, can you send me a low resolution version of this? When you export, you're going to put this at 72 PPI. Don't ask me why one's 300 and one's 72. It's just industry standard for a high resolution picture, and this is a low resolution. And as a reminder, because you guys may know this, but people on the recording may not, what I'm referring to here is when you export your image out of Lightroom. So if we come over here and we export our image out of Lightroom, the place where we put this is here
Right.
under image sizing, just for everyone's read. So if that's 300, you're exporting out a high resolution. If that's 72, you're exporting out a low resolution. A low resolution as well, quite a useful thing. If ever you want to email like 10 pictures at a time to a friend, it's very hard to email 10 high resolution pictures. You have to do like 2 at a time. A high resolution picture, even if this is the same size, is usually 4 to 5 times larger, just the file size. And you see this a lot with GCA, right? Where they say we want the file to be between 2 and 5 megabytes, not to exceed 5 megabytes. That's where we have to be careful here. Even with a high resolution, if I spat this out and I put 20 inches here, this is going to be way too big. And again, I'm going to give you a good pro trick here. For the GCA contest, whenever they give you those parameters, 2 to 5 megabytes, 99.9% of the time, if you put the long edge as 12 and the resolution is 300, it's going to come out at about 4 megabytes. You're going to be smack bang in the middle. So this would be the standard export settings that I would be looking for them to use. And this again, to go back to something we talked about in the previous class, I think someone raised their hand and asked about aspect ratios and keeping them constrained. Do you remember when we crop? We don't want to keep that padlock cropped. As long as we've got that padlock locked, everything that comes out of our cameras is always 3:2, unless we tell Lightroom to change it otherwise. Using this 12 keeps it within that aspect ratio, because ultimately, if you think about like a physical thing that we are taking out of Lightroom and handing it to GCA or me or to the print shop, we're actually handing them a 12:8. We're just timesing this by 4 and timesing this by 4. So this is times 4. So it's the same aspect ratio. It's just a slightly bigger one that you're sending to GCA so they get better quality, or to the printer. So usually, like me as a professional photographer, when a client says to me, we need high resolution JPEG files, I always size them to 12. It's just like a not massive, but not too small. Suzette, you look a little confused. That makes sense?
Well, so do you always keep your pictures in the 3:2?
No,
Everything you do?
no, not always. But I would say 80% of, unless someone asks me otherwise, or I know I have an 8:10 frame, I have an 11:14 frame. A client has asked me to put one of my pieces massive on a wall, and we know that an 8:10 aspect ratio would work better, then I would change it. But what I would do is so let's just come back to yours for a second. It's a great question. And let me get rid of my drawings. If I crop this to an 8:10, because I decided that that was the aspect ratio that we needed, so let's just say 8:10, and then I'm losing stuff off the sides, okay? So I crop it to an 8:10. Now when I go to export it, if I just want to do a standard high resolution picture, nothing special, this stays at this state, this goes to 10, because then I know that the other side is going to be 8. But I can also know if I times this by 5 to 50, then I know that the other side is also going to get times by 5.
Yeah.
So you're going to end up with a 50:30. No, hold on, 8, 16, 24, 30. Sorry, 50:40. Um, so so the key is that you have to first of all choose your aspect ratio. Unless you are printing large, Suzette, and you decide I really want to print something and I want to blow it up large on my wall, it's very rare that you have to go over the spec of the size that you have cropped to, i.e. an 8:10 would be 10, a 6:4 I usually put as 12, an 11:14 this would be 14. But if you know you have a wall that is 30 inches and you want to print something out 30 inches, then I want you to size it at the correct size, at 30 inches, which means it comes out of Lightroom. It's kind of like pressing print and it's come out that big. If you don't do that, when you send it to the printer, they try and blow it up for you. And then you inevitably end up with a picture that is not what we call tack sharp. It doesn't quite look sharp because they've tried to blow that. You've given them something small and they've tried to make it like this. I'd rather that you give them the big one. They don't have to do anything to it. They just hit print.
So
And
Adam, how do you
you got
relate this to the requirement for a GCA that's either 50 or 60 total measurements?
great question. So, and I get asked this a lot. In fact, I think Catherine emailed me about this, who's listening to the recording. It may have been someone else, but so GCA, what Nancy's asking is GCA also often asks that the perimeter of the picture does not exceed a certain size, which involves you sometimes having to do a bit of math and thinking, okay, if I make this, let's say we did an 11:40, let's say we did a 12:8. So if we did a 12:8, you're going to do 12, 12, 12, 12. You're going to be 12 plus 12, 24, 8 plus 8, 16. You're going to be right in the sweet spot of where they want it. They're looking for a 12:8 in most of those situations, because they know that most people are cropping at a 3:10, 3:2, as in they're coming out their camera at that 3:2 aspect ratio. So when I exported this, I would put the long edge at 12. Now I could push it a little bit and I could say, okay, I want to push this and I want it to be an 11 by 14. But then I've got to run the math again and I've got to say, okay, if I crop it to an 11 by 14, am I going to be within, and this is right on the cutoff. So I'm going to be 14, 14, 11, 11, 14 by 14, 28 plus 22. I'm at 50. So essentially, you can think of when they give you that, and I don't like. I think it's really confusing that they do it that way sometimes, because I'd rather they just gave you the size and said we want an 8 by 12, we want an 11 by 14. I know why they do it because they're thinking about how they're putting it up on the walls and how they're displaying it in their certain shows, but it can be very confusing to people. I would basically say if ever you get those requirements, which I see a lot, you have two choices. It's either going to be an 8 by 12 or it's going to be an 11 by 14. And you can just stick at those two sizes. And you can, and the reason I don't want you just doing like a, instead of an 8 by 12, I don't want you doing like a 9 by 13 is because that's not a standard size. So you'll pay about 50% more to print that just by adding the 1 inch and moving it away from a standard size. So if it, go on, Suzette.
So Adam, are you saying that because um, for that primary reason that if you're sending it to a printer, it's going to be difficult? But if we're printing ourselves,
Yeah, then that's
we
different.
can basically do whatever we want.
Then you can do it, then you can do whatever you want. But a lot of people who I see are now, if you're print, but they even sometimes because a lot of GCA contests will ask for it to be like matted onto a board, for
Oh
example.
yeah.
A lot of people don't want to get busy with that, and a lot of people now will go to an online printer and they'll plug in the numbers and they'll import the file, and then 3 days later it gets sent to them and it's all nicely matted and in a sleeve, and people just don't want the aggravation of printing. Although I like printing my own stuff, but yes, to answer your question, if you print yourself, you can do whatever you want. But I would still get in the habit and the discipline of trying to keep to standard sizing. Because it's just going to say, if ever, Suzette, if you printed a 9 by 13 and then you suddenly decide, I want to put this in a frame,
Yeah.
it's going to be difficult. You're going to lose
Right.
something on the sides. And so the keeping to standard sizes, and one place where you can, we're all on the West Coast, everyone can go to, in fact, I'll bring it up here on the computer because there's only three of us here. I'll just show you. So let's just say I go here and I go bay photo. Okay, so this is a very popular, in fact, probably the best printer on the West Coast. But if we go to photo prints over here, you're going to see they're going to have tons and tons and tons of, let's just click on one. They're going to have tons of sizes. If I can find the sizes, they're going to be down here somewhere. Here we go. So these are all standard sizes. So if you deviate, so there's your 8 by 10, there's your 8 by 12, there's your 8 by 14, there's no 9 by 13. If you deviate from those, rather than this suddenly be a $5 print, it's going to be like a $12 print for basically the same thing because they have to custom make a piece of paper. They have to custom cut it. It's just a lot more labor. So, and you and anyone on the recording go, if you want to get familiar with what the industry standard is in terms of sizes, not only could you go to bayphoto.com and have a look, that's a good resource to go and have a look, but you can also go, when you come to Lightroom and you come to your crops, Adobe put the most common crops here. They're those five: a square, 8 by 10, 8.5 by 11, that's a piece of paper, A4 paper, 5 by 7, 6 by 4. They got a couple of extra ones, bonus ones down here. And you can see like I at points put in really random ones because I have a very specific need to do that. I have a space that needs a 20 by 4 inch, which would be like a panoramic picture like that. But I don't usually want to do that because I could submit this to GCA. And if you think about it, 20,
Yeah,
20,
definitely.
4, that still is coming in under the 50 requirements. So there's nothing wrong with potentially giving them a panoramic. But in the majority of instances, if you want to keep your life simple and easy and you've been photographing on your cameras, I would be thinking about sending these images in as either 8 by 12s or 11 by 14s. Does that make sense, Nancy?
Yes, that really helps. And
Okay.
at some point in one of the Focus magazines, I don't know whether it was Eloise said to use the maximum printers at the maximum size that they'll allow.
Yeah, well, 11 by 14 would take you to that because that's your 50. So if they say it can't be bigger than 50 inches all the way around, then in your head now you can think 11 by 14, the math takes me to 50. 12 by 8 is going to take you a little bit smaller. Um, One other thing, just while I'm talking about printing, and I want to make sure I get to Suzette's pictures before she's got to run, is that just to come back for the benefit of everyone on the group, whenever we're printing large, and I would say to print large, I would say anything bigger than an A4 piece of paper. So if you ever need to print bigger than an 8.5 by 11, but I'm thinking bigger sizes like 20 by 24, 24 by 30, large prints, I want you to change this from JPEG to TIFF. That's just giving the printer much more information to work with. It's giving them a humongous file, but I want them to have that humongous file because I want what you see on screen to be the same as what you get when you get the print back. And again, if you give them a JPEG, they're going to try and blow it up themselves. It's kind of like me saying, I'm going to fold up this piece of, I want you to have the whole piece of paper, but I'm actually going to fold it up into a number of pieces and then I want you to pull it apart. You're going to see all the creases and you're going to see things that are just not going to look as good. I'd rather I just give you the entire piece of paper at the full size and then everything's done for you. So just again, for benefit of everyone in the group, image format TIFF, compression, none, otherwise you're going to shrink it. And this is the color space. I'm not going to go into it too much now, but you can just leave this. This means standard red, green, and blue. This is like an international kind of standardization of what the colors look like and how people's printers are set up. And this is the most common one. And we'll keep this at 8 for the time being. If you put it to 16, it's just going to make the file probably too big for you to transfer. And unless you're printing something and putting it like on a billboard, you don't need this. So TIFF, none, sRGB, 8. Last thing while I'm here, make sure this is turned off. I just turned it on by mistake because we don't want Lightroom automatically trying to sharpen our pictures. We're going to do it instead ourselves, which I may show you in a minute on one of Suzette's pictures. Okay, any questions on that, Suzette? Okay, was some of that new information?
Yes.
Good, 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 good. Okay, so let's look at your pictures. So I can feel your pain in terms of when you were trying to shoot this with your Sony and not being able to get close enough. I think the composition that you've achieved here is good. I would probably even be, because you've still got a lot of room to run here on your Nikon.
Yeah.
Like, I would probably take out that negative, too much of that negative space on the top left,
Yeah.
this black area, because I
I was
really,
pretty certain you'd say that.
yeah, I really like this dappled light. So this, when light filters through trees, or we call this dappled light, or this like interesting light.
That's actually a different lichen. I mean, there were just different lichens
Oh,
all over.
it's just a different plant. Well, you've done a really nice black and white conversion here, by the way. Nice job. You did this in Lightroom. You turned it black and white.
I did.
Good, very good. You've really achieved that big dynamic range that we were
Thank
looking
you.
for. Looks very three-dimensional. Um, were these things moving at all?
No.
Okay. So
So if it's moving, it was I who was moving.
it's actually not moving that well. One thing I just want you to make you aware of is when you zoom with your camera, the more you zoom, inherently the less stable your camera becomes because you're just holding onto a longer thing that's sticking out further from your body, which is nice and tight and compact and like hopefully doesn't move too much. So we've got to remember when we zoom in, and you're right on the border here, you're okay. I just want to make you aware of it. Is there's a rule that says shutter speed should be greater than or faster than 1 over the focal length, which I've mentioned to this group before, which basically means that the absolute cutoff that I would have wanted you using your shutter speed here, even if you were photographing something that didn't move, would be, it doesn't exist 1 over 140, but it would be 1 over 150. Now you're very close here. I want you to give yourself, which probably means if you took 10 of these and we looked at them, maybe 3 wouldn't be shot. and I'm
Right.
going to make sure 10 out of 10 are sharp. So here I would have just covered my bases and I would have gone up to probably 1250 in terms
Okay.
of the settings. And then just your ISO could have come up to 600. Would have been fine.
Okay.
But just remember that when you use your zoom lenses, you have to compensate with your shutter speed to minimize camera shake. That makes sense?
It does.
Good. Great. But yeah, really, really nice camera.
Applying it, that's the problem, remembering.
But the hard thing is with that one, and everyone finds this tricky, is when you look through your camera, you don't see the focal length number. So there's no, so as you're just like looking through your camera, you're zooming in and out. There's no indicator anywhere on your screen of whether you're at 150, 200, or in Suzette's case here, she could have gone all the way to 300. You just have to kind of, and usually I tell people to remember, like, Suzette, you know, if you put on this lens and you zoom it all the way in on something, your shutter speed should not be going lower than 1 over 300.
Yeah.
If you're somewhere in the middle, it should probably be about 1 over 200. And if you're right pulled back, you can probably get away with 1 over 125. But usually, when the lens is on, I'd say always pitch faster than you need because maybe you're zooming in, you're zooming out, you're zooming in, you're zooming out. You're looking at your grandkids, and it's like suddenly you want a close one. Suddenly, what I don't want you to be is be at the slower shutter speed and not have time to change it. So it's almost like anticipating for the worst case scenario. So I would like, as a rule of thumb with this lens, I'd be like, whenever this lens is on my camera, my shutter speed is going to be somewhere in the range of 1/250 to 1 over 500.
Okay.
That just takes out all camera shake. We don't have to worry about it. The only reason where this rule doesn't apply is obviously if you're on a tripod.
I'll have to give my husband accolades for that because he told me he thought it sounded like it should be faster.
Mm.
You know, the click, the little noise.
Well, that's another nice thing about the Nikon compared to the mirrorless is the mirrorless you don't hear the click. So there's pros and cons of both, but the mirrorless, when you change the shutter speed, you see it getting brighter and darker, which you don't see on your Nikon. You have to look at the meter. But yeah, hearing that click can often be a familiar cue to someone for them to think, it went ch.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit slow. There's something we need to do.
Well, that was very slow.
Yeah, that was really slow, but to prove that, but yours would be but
Yeah, yes.
still you want you want it quicker. Nancy, you look like
Can't you turn on the audio for the exposure on the Nikon, or is that only certain ones?
it's a great question. In fact, on every mirrorless camera, you can turn on a fake noise
Oh,
because there isn't a mechanical shutter. What you're hearing on Suzette's camera is actually a mechanical shutter going.
okay.
There's tons. People download all kinds of silly noises. People go like, and people put like a whistle on their camera. There's all types of funny things that you can do. But yes, you can turn on the noise,
Okay.
but it's what's the best
It's superficial. It's not the
artificial. It's
actual.
artificial. It's not actually real. It's
Okay.
just there as an indicator. Um, okay, great. And definitely Suzanne, very good for growth. Certainly fulfills that theme. Actually we can look at these two turtles together. I'm going to throw it to Nancy to be the judge of your one. Nancy, which one of these do you think is more impactful?
The one on the right.
Why?
Well, because I have a tendency to zoom in I mean, it's amazing to see that many turtles lined up, but
It was all about the growth.
yes.
In fact, if you notice,
The
there's a
question was
couple in there planning
impactful,
some more
though.
growth.
Yeah, I noticed the one in the middle there. I see him. Um,
I missed
so
that one.
so I as a picture, the one on the right is definitely stronger. Correct. It's the common dilemma that we always face when we see like something really interesting like this. We're like, what do we include? What do we not include? Um, I mean, Suzette, there's tons of ways that you could have sliced and diced this, especially the one on the left. Like you could have been like, I love these two turtles having fun. I'm gonna do a crop like that. You could
There
have
you go.
you could have offset just the guys up here. Like there's
Yeah,
now harder. You're losing the resolution because it's off your iPhone.
right.
But yes, as an image, this is a really good example of the one on the right by taking out some of the clutter. The common misconception, right, is I have to show everything. But sometimes by showing everything, you actually show less, as in you tell a weaker story because there's no focal point. And there isn't a focal point in the one on the left. It's pretty and it tells a story. But the one on the right tells them, especially the way the light is hitting the turtles in the one on the one on the right, I really like how it's hitting on their like here, on their like this one here and this one here.
I worked on that a little bit with
Yeah, no,
masking.
good. Did
Um,
you one thing,
don't
but
you think
we
it's funny that they're in the same pose with their light?
yeah,
I mean, I just thought it was really funny.
it's and look at the quality of the iPhone. Like if I just increase the
This
exposure.
one is not an iPhone.
Oh, this one's not an iPhone. That's why it looks
No,
better.
no, no. This is with my Nikon.
This is video and icon. Great. So you can see actually there's more you could have pulled out here. Look, I just
Oh
pulled out
yeah,
the
I see
shadows a
that.
little bit. Look at all that information, like especially like in
Oh,
here, like
shoot.
in
What
his
did you
head.
do to do that?
So I usually when I see a picture like this,
Yeah,
okay, I'm looking and I'm straight away thinking, there's certain areas of this that are probably too dark, and there's certain areas that are a little bit too bright.
yeah,
Rather than use the exposure slider, which is like a global
yeah.
slider, which makes everything brighter and everything darker.
Yes,
Which usually tell people don't use this. Only use this as a rescue remedy. Only use this if your picture came out like that or your picture
yeah,
came out like
yeah,
that. Instead, we want to be a bit more refined with how we adjust the tones or the luminance, the brightness in our photography. And that's where these four sliders, often you don't even need to go to the mask, Suzette, because these four sliders are so useful in that I can see here all of this stuff is in the shadows. All of this.
yeah, because I did work on that. So
Yeah.
I
And
worked
I
in the wrong place. Okay.
And all I need to do is I need to, if I slide anything in Lightroom, when you slide it to the right is a positive change. So I'm going to slide this to the right, and this is going to increase the brightness of the shadows. If I slide it down, it's going to make them darker. But notice it doesn't have any effect on like the turtle's head, like this bright bit on his eye.
Yeah,
That's not going to change because that's not in the shadows. But if I do the other one, the highlights, it's going to make the bright bits brighter or darker. Now, this picture doesn't really need highlights being touched. It just needed a little lift in the shadows. Now, you could have also, Suzette, which is what you did probably did, is you could have gone in and said, I want to put a mask just on this guy here. But
I
even
did
there,
it in portions of him. Like his head didn't really show up against the shadow
yeah.
originally. And so I wanted his head to show up a little better.
But even here, when I do his whole body, I would not use the exposure slider.
Yeah, no, I think that was my biggest mistake.
I would
Okay.
use the shadows. It's more subtle, but look, I'm suddenly being able
Oh
to
yeah,
see
that's great.
his underbelly there, right? And
Yes,
then I'm
that's
like,
exactly what I was aiming towards.
and then you're like, I want to go in and I want to focus really on his head. Then I would just brush on it, a little brush like this. The shortcut key was K for me to get there. But you could just go mask, brush. And then again, I wouldn't use the exposure because
Yeah,
it look fake. I usually good editing, we don't know you've edited it. Less is more. So I'm just going to slightly increase the shadows of him a little bit, give him a little bit more dynamic range by taking down the blacks and the whites, and probably just increasing the texture a tad. And straight away, I've gone from that to that.
yeah,
Big
yeah, that's
difference,
great.
right?
Thank you. That
I
was
like
very
So
it.
why
helpful.
use the brush rather than the radial?
Good
Yeah,
question.
on the head.
Just on that little bit, I wanted to make sure that there was no spillage
Okay.
into the water behind. Here, I could have used a radial, um, but just often when there's something very precise, like an eye or a head, like if you're talking about people's faces, I will often use a brush on those very specific areas. But I wouldn't brush totally over the turtle.
No.
Because if I brush totally over the turtle and then I go to change the brightness, it's going to look like we've copied and pasted him on. It's not going to look real. He's not going to blend into the background. But really nice job, Suzette. But you can see, and even on this one, I mean, I think you were all the way zoomed in, but you could even like we don't even need to see like the backside of that turtle. We could probably go to there because maybe all the way over here was pulling our eye a bit away from probably where I really ultimately wanted it to get to, which is probably the guy on the left who's in the best light. So I don't mind here as long as the crop looks intentional and it's not like
Yes,
kind
yes,
of crop
I
look.
understand that.
If the crop's intentional like that, that's
Yeah.
just one way you could do it. I mean, again, there's tons of different ways. I could take out that other turtle completely and I could just go on this guy. That's a really great. That looks
That is
really,
pretty with that
really pretty.
light on it.
He's posing for you perfectly.
Yes.
They were both posing, and I thought it was cute that there was a little guy and then a big guy. That was growth.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm sorry, I have to dash.
no problem. You can listen to the recording for the
I
next two
will, for sure.
of
Thank
yours.
you very much.
No problem. Bye bye.
See you next
Bye.
week.
See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's carry on. We'll look at Suzette's, and then in fact, now I'm going to mix and match it. So let's take a look. So this is yours, Nancy, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So nice job with the lens, baby. Um, Good fast shutter speed, definitely growth. Really like the complementary colors. I'd probably watch out for this thing here, the stem. I think it's the
Oh,
stem or
okay.
something. Um, I think if that wasn't there, I think this would look better because, especially because it's a highlight, I think it's trying to pull my eye there a little bit rather than in the nice softness of the flower. Now you could very easily, let's see if it does a good job, not even need to come out of Lightroom to do that. If you remember, you've got the remove tool here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if I use my square bracket keys to make it bigger, and then I paint over this and I let go, it does a pretty good job. Not perfect, but pretty
Yeah.
good. If you want it to try again, Nancy, you come over here to refresh, and it will do it again. And every time you hit refresh, it's gonna
Oh,
make
that's right.
gonna make that bit in the middle look different. You see it
Mhm.
changing every time I do it, just very
Yes.
subtly. So often we can hit that until we get to where we need to be. Now, in this case, this was relatively simple. But if this had been a complicated twig with lots of buds coming off it at the back, or it had been a lamppost or something, then when I came to the remove tool, I would have wanted to check this box that says use generative AI. This is the easy way, how I'm just doing it now. This is like the quick and easy way. For a lot of the time, that gets us to where we need to go. You can see the difference there. Look, I think if you showed that to someone, they would have no idea you took it out.
You're right.
You see? I think it
So
looks
I'm trying to figure out where
where
that
I
came
went.
from.
Where I went.
Yeah.
Let me go back. Okay. So I went a bit quickly there. So let's start again. So I went to develop. So this is for everyone on the benefit of the recording. This is how to eat for things that I would class as like easy things to remove, which could be sensor spots on your lens, like it could, like on your photo. It could be a bird in the sky. It could be an erroneous stem in the background or whatever it is. In those instances, we're going to come up here to the what looks like the eraser.
Hmm.
Now, again, until like a year ago, we had to go to Photoshop to do this. So this is really helpful that this is called the remove tool. And there's tons of things you can do when you click on this. There's three icons here. And these will look familiar to you, Nancy, and to pretty much everyone on the recording, for those of you who've ever played around with taking things out in Photoshop. This one is the stamp. So this one's the stamp.
Hmm.
This one is called the heal tool. And this one is just simply called remove. Now, I think at the moment in Lightroom, in my professional opinion, the stamp and the heal aren't very good. They're good in Photoshop, but they're not good in Lightroom. The tool hasn't quite transferred over as well as it should have done. So I wanted you to make sure that this one is always checked.
Okay.
Okay. And sometimes when you click on this, it's just the stamp will be highlighted, or this will be highlighted by mistake. So all you do is you just click on this one. The next slider is size. It's just how big or small you want the brush to be. And I'd rather you do that with the square bracket keys.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that was both.
Yeah. And again, for the benefit of everyone on the recording, it's tapping the square bracket keys, not holding them. You tap, tap, tap to make them bigger, tap, and you can see the slider, the size slider. You can hold it, but sometimes we lose a bit more control. So I tend to encourage people to tap, tap, tap to get it where they need to be. Now by default, Nancy, all I have to do is get the brush a little bit bigger than the thing I want to get rid of. And then I just left click hold and I just brush over it and then I let go. Okay. And that straight away when I did that, you're going to see where I drew here and a new box came up over here that's that says selected. And this is telling me that I've currently got an active area of the photograph that I'm trying to change, that I'm trying to take something out. Okay.
Mhm.
Now you can see here that again, this can sometimes go, this is telling me that I've used the remove tool and I haven't used the heal, the clone, or this thing called generative remove that we haven't talked about yet. But you want to make sure this says remove.
Okay.
And then you've got an opacity slider. And the best way to think about this again is it's like layers in Photoshop. So it's like the original, this is an iris, right, Nancy?
Yes.
Like the iris is at the bottom, and then we've taken a piece of tracing paper over the top and we've removed the thing on the tracing paper, not on the original. So what we can do is we can make the tracing paper the additional layer. At the moment, it's like a solid white piece of paper. So if this is the new one and your old one's behind it, this is a solid one and we can't see anything behind. If I reduce this, what's going to happen is that stem is going to come more and more back.
Hmm.
So at 0, it's like I've done nothing. At 100, it's like I've totally removed it. Now, the majority of the time when we remove something, we want to remove it. So we want to make sure this is at 100. But it's nice that it gives us the option to essentially refine the change. Because maybe we want it, in this case, Nancy, we're like, oh yeah, you just want to see a little bit like of the stem faded in the background rather than see the whole thing. So it's just an opportunity to refine it. But essentially what we're doing is we're making the opaqueness of the remove tool very opaque, 100%, or we're changing the translucency of it. And when you get down to 0, it's like it's completely see-through and you don't see anything. You don't see your change.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, so in most cases, you can stop here for simple things. All you do is you hit return once to set it, twice to close the remove
Mhm.
tool. We're now back to our normal sliders. Now notice that because there is a little dot on the remove tool, okay, that's an indicator to you if ever you come back to this that it's a reminder that you took something out of this picture. If I click on it and I wake it up and I hover over the picture, at any point, you could do this in a year's time, you could come back to this picture, left click on it and hit delete, and it will go back to the original. So this is why you hear me talking about so much when I describe Lightroom as non-destructive editing. This is non-destructive editing because basically you can't screw it up. You can always go back. It's not like you've done something, you've saved it in Photoshop and then you brought it back and then you're stuck because you've like flattened a load of layers together. So this works incredibly well for little things. I'm just going to pretend. Let's just try it just while we're using these little white spots here. Okay. If I wanted to get rid of them, not saying I do, but it's easy to do if you need to. You look like you have a question.
I do. Normally, when you're using that tool,
Yeah.
you get a little, it's not a flag, but a little dark marker that tells you where you've deleted something.
Yeah, they're there. Look at them. See? They're two little erasers.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't see it.
Can you see them there on the picture?
I do. I didn't see it after the
Yeah.
fact.
So you will always have, and if I remove something down here, I'll just make something up, then you'd have three little erasers. So
Okay.
that's
I
telling you,
just didn't see it when you, I was probably my head down making a
no,
note.
no problem, no problem. And that's why I said, Nancy, at any point I could say, oh, actually, I'm going to wake up this one, left click on it, and I don't want to delete what was there, and then it comes back.
Okay. I just missed a step.
You're good. You're good. And it's good for the benefit of everyone on the recording. So, everyone, this is a fantastic tool for cleaning up a photograph. Let's say you go to the beach and there's a footprint in the beach, or you go to a field and there's like litter in the field and you want to clean it up. This will do an amazing job. Really good. But this is not the tool to use when you have a lamppost in the background here or a person behind the flower. In those instances, and I'll actually just jump to someone else's picture just for us to show. Let's say we wanted to remove the zebra. Yeah, just making something up. Okay. I, whenever I'm making an assessment of how easy or how difficult is this, I have to think about if the zebra wasn't there, what would be there? And in this case, you've got grass, you've got like the log of the tree, you've got this plant. Maybe it's still relatively easy, but it's not that easy. So in this case, I want to think this isn't like cleaning up these little twigs over here, which are easy. Like there, I've just cleaned up the little twigs before, after on the bottom right. You see that, Nancy?
Hmm.
So for more complex things, I want you to check, or everyone to check, this box that says use generative AI. This is again trying to take a tool from Photoshop into Lightroom. Now, when I paint over it, you're going to see, you want to paint over the thing you want to get rid of, and you want to leave a little bit of border around it, just like that. Then I'm going to let go, and it's going to go red. I didn't get this with the other tool we used. I only got this because I checked that box saying generative AI, use generative AI. This is now essentially, I'll let you write a note, Nancy.
That's okay. Okay.
Okay. This is now a mask. You can think of it as a mask. So you've drawn a mask around the zebra. Over here, and you can see again, you get this selection box.
Mhm.
You get the color here, red. If you're trying to get rid of something red, you can change this to any color you want, but most people have it as red or green as default. We'll keep it as red. You can add or subtract because sometimes we draw around it and we're like, oops, we didn't get the whole zebra. Or oops, we got too much because we got stuff over here by mistake. So here, this is just a brush. It's just a refining tool before we hit the remove button. That if we want to subtract some of the red paint, you select subtract and you brush it away.
Okay.
If I want to, if I, by accident I went like that and I want to add, I just hit add and I added it. So this is a great tool, everyone, because this never used to exist. We used to have to do this a much more time consuming way. This is called refining the mask. And they want you to do this before you make the decision and hit this button saying remove. And the key thing when refining a mask, when you're trying to remove something using generative AI, is you have to make sure that you leave a border around the thing that you're trying to get rid of. If you go too close, it won't work, or just the results won't be as desirable as you want. And whoever's photo this is, don't worry, we're going to come and look at this photo in a minute and we'll talk about it. But I just want to use it to show everyone how to do this. So now I'm happy. I hit remove and I touch remove over here. And you're going to get this box that you didn't see before that says removing area using AI. Okay.
Did a great job.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really good. And now you see we got this selected box, and before it was remove that was selected. Now it's generative remove. Again, we've got the opacity exactly the same as what we had before. Look, I can bring the zebra back if I want to bring him back, kind of have him fading in or out of the forest. But most of the time you want this at 100 because you want to get rid of the zebra. And the added thing that you have here using the generative AI, and it's the same in Photoshop for those of you who've practiced this in Photoshop, is you have these things called variations. So by default, you get three different choices of what does it look like if the zebra is not there. You just click on these little bars. There's number two. There's number three. There's back to number one. One, two, three. To be honest, they're all pretty good. You have a favorite, Nancy?
I think I like number one because it fills in
More.
more of the tree, grass, whatever.
Yeah, I agree. The foliage back there looks good. Now, sometimes we do this and we don't get a desired result. It looks okay, but it's not perfect. In those cases, what I want you to do is pick your favorite out of one, two, and three. Pick your favorite and then hit generate again. And what that's basically telling Lightroom is I really like number one, but it's not quite where I want it to be. Lightroom will then regenerate another three that are based off number one. And there's no limit. You can keep on generating and generating and generating until you get to where you want to go. And the beauty of doing this in Lightroom, and I know Nancy, we've practiced this together in Photoshop. We've never looked at it in Lightroom, and it's only getting better. This, when it first came out in Lightroom, like 6 months ago, was in beta, and it was terrible. Like it wouldn't give me a result like this. But if we went and did this in Photoshop, and then we saved it, we made a new layer, we lassoed around it, we hit the generative fill, all that stuff that I think most people in this group know how to do. When you save it, you're going to have a new version of the photo in Lightroom. So you're going to have one with the zebra, one without the zebra. But you can't go back. If you want to get the zebra back, you've got to go right back to the original photograph. The beauty of doing it here all in Lightroom is if for some reason I'm like, I want to do two crops of this picture and I want one where, which may work, one where I've just got the kind of the ostrich walking into the frame like that. And I've decided that's my picture. But then I've got another picture and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to just create a copy. And I'm like, I'd like to do another crop where I see both animals. All I have to do is go back to the remove tool, hover over it, and there's my marker. That's like the black pin, Nancy. I left click on it and I then hit the delete key on my keyboard and the zebra comes back. That makes sense? So,
Yes.
so
I'm just thinking in Photoshop, you don't have that option because once you've deleted it,
it's gone.
it's gone.
Yeah. Well,
It's just refreshing.
once you flatten the layers, yeah. That's why I like this, and I'm showing this to the group because this has become more and more advanced and it's getting better and better. And the more that I can keep you all in Lightroom without needing to go to Photoshop, the better. One, it just makes your life easier and quicker. But secondly, the most important thing is we have the capability, if ever we need to, nothing is permanent. I can just bring the zebra back. Hey, Susie.
Hi there. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, don't worry. We've got a well, in fact, we had a couple of other people and then they've dropped off. So it's like people are dropping in and out today.
We have our private session, Susie.
So you
Oh,
and
how nice.
so so we've got a small group today. A lot of people I know are traveling and away. So we've got it recorded, Susie, for everyone. So you'll hear me refer to the recording. But essentially, you guys, it's really nice. We have a session where we have a very small group. I can attend to any of your issues one-on-one. Susie, what we were just doing here is we were just going over, Suzette was here a minute ago, and one of the questions that everyone was asking was, how do we remove things effectively in Lightroom without going to Photoshop? So
Okay.
I'm not going to go over the whole thing again, but you can go and look at the recordings.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I just showed two different ways to do it. But essentially, what I was just saying to Nancy was a big benefit of doing it in Lightroom rather than doing it in Photoshop is that it is non-destructive.
Mm.
By that, it means you can always go back. I'm like, oh yeah, I love like this, and I just want the ostrich in the picture because maybe it's a cleaner picture. But at some stage, I come back to this picture in 6 months' time, and I'm like, oh, I remember there was a zebra there. That eraser has a little dot on it that I can click on. That's a reminder to me that I took something out. There's a tiny little dot underneath the eraser, the remove
Oh
tool.
my gosh.
And when I hover over the picture, I have that little eraser in the picture. If I wake it up by hitting left click, then I can do one of two things. I can either reduce the opacity of what I did, so I can kind of fade the zebra in or out, or I can just say, I actually just want the zebra to come, oops, I want the zebra to come back completely, and I just hit the delete key on my keyboard, and the zebra comes back.
Mm.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And while we're on this picture, actually, whoever took this picture, I like it, but I actually think I would have probably, I think I understand why someone was doing it with the theme of growth. But again, having two focal points like this can sometimes be somewhat confusing. If anything, what ends up happening is because kind of this guy's looking here and this guy's looking here, is we end up somewhere in the middle. And we actually don't end up having the benefit of the fact that we've got these really interesting animals. So I would probably hone in on one or the other. And that was kind of my thinking when I removed the zebra. I'll do it again, and you can all go back and then watch the recording. I've shown you a bit slower how to do this, but I'll do it again here. Don't need to refine the mask. I'm going to go remove. It's going to take out the zebra. Oh, look at that one. Interesting there. That's the first. Look at that. Okay, so that we don't want it to do. So that was a disaster. So look, it added in a sheep or a mutant sheep. No, look, see, it's
Rare.
kind of interesting. Yeah. So in this case, I'd start again because I'm like, look, it's put in a different zebra. Um, but the point that I was trying to make was I think this photo is a stronger photo without that zebra there, with the ostrich walking in. This was taken on a camera. So remember whoever took this before you crop it, it looks like a bit of a crop on it. I can see by the size to enhance the photo using the super resolution tool. And a camera trick or tip here for whoever took this is your shutter speed is a little bit too slow. And you can see that in the movement of the ostrich's legs. You can see that movement, and you can also see it a little bit in the movement of the ostrich's head. So really, whenever we're photographing animals, I mean, we shouldn't be slower than 1125 should be a real cutoff. And if anything, for like most animals, I'd be somewhere between 1 over 125 and 1 over 500. Now, if the animals, it depends. The ostrich here is walking across the frame this way. That means if you watch my finger and he goes across, he's in and out pretty fast. If he was walking this way, from front to back, or back to front, you wouldn't need as fast a shutter speed to capture. Now, obviously, an ostrich is really fast. If anything, if I had the ability, I usually, when I photograph wildlife, and this is the same if true of pets and kids and anything that's moving fast, I always say to people, set your shutter speed to anticipate the fastest movement. Because what you don't want to do is be at 1 over 125 and then this ostrich suddenly takes off and sprints away and you're and every shot's blurry because you don't have time to change the shutter speed. So whenever bird photographers use this the whole time, the bird may be sitting on the tree, and if it's sitting still, you can get away with like 1 over 250 as your shutter speed. But what happens if the bird then suddenly flies away? You're stuffed. So instead, I want you to set your shutter speeds to the fastest possible movement of your subject. Does that make sense?
That's
Nancy?
using shutter priority.
No,
No?
you can do it in manual. No,
Oh, okay.
I mean, you could do it in shutter speed priority. The problem is if you do it in shutter speed priority, you have no control of anything else that's going on. I think everyone in this group is advanced enough to do it in manual. I just mean
Okay.
that when you stood here and you're watching this ostrich, I'd be like, this ostrich could take off. I mean, maybe not. I don't know how much land there was here, but it could move fast. So I'm gonna take this up to, I don't know, 1 over 2000, just in case the ostrich suddenly sprints. All I do to compensate is I just increase my ISO. But I would be set up with the settings, Nancy, for how fast I think the thing may
Okay.
move, not how fast it's currently moving. Because once it's moved, you don't have time to flip the dial and change. I
Right.
see a lot of people, a lot of students of mine photograph hummingbirds, and they'll be photographing the hummingbird on the feeder, and they're like, "Wow, this is great! I've got a perfectly crisp shot of the hummingbird at 1/250 when it's sitting on the feeder doing nothing." But then they don't understand when it flies away why the whole thing's blurry, and they don't have time to react and change it. No one would. So I'd rather have all of the pictures on the feeder and it flying at 1/4000th of a second and everyone to be sharp.
Okay.
It's just a general rule of thumb whenever we're photographing anything with movement. It's just a good thing to bear in mind is anticipate the fastest amount of movement and set your shutter speed to that. And it's most
Do you
common to
even
get,
do that with sports or
yeah,
vehicles,
everything.
bicyclists?
Well, I mean, a cyclist a bit different because it's probably cycling at a pretty like consistent speed. But if I was photographing, let's just say I was photographing a racetrack, a horse race. I'm just going to make something up. I was photographing a horse race, and all the horses were lined up at the beginning, and they're all kind of floating around, but they're not running. Again, I could probably get away with being at like 1/500 to like get all the horses being crisp. But the minute they start running, this is not going to suffice. So I would rather be prepared. Same Nancy, if you were taking a picture of Sophie, Sophie is Nancy's dog. If if my dog is like lying down and resting, unless I can clearly see he's asleep, then and he's like chasing a ball backwards and forwards, and then he suddenly stops. I want my shutter speed fast enough that I can get the picture of him chasing the ball backwards and forwards, not
Okay.
just for when he's lying down, because I won't be able to change it quick enough. And what you soon learn, and the more you practice and the more you like get familiar with shutter speeds, is what shutter speeds freeze different speeds. Like how fast do you need to go? And in truth, anything above 1/1000th to 1/4000th is an insanely fast shutter speed. 1/1000th of a second. This is really reserved for like a cheetah sprinting across the Serengeti, like a race car going past you. But sometimes we use it creatively for like reflections in water. Like I'm just looking at Susie's picture behind her. Like if you go close in on some reflections in water. In fact, let me show you a really good example of this, actually. I think it's good for everyone to see. I'll show you, let me just show you something here for a second. Because you can use fast shutter speeds to also see things that we don't see as humans, because we don't see it 1/4000th of a second. And to that point, I'll show you. I just want to find an example picture here. Hold on. Second. Just looking for it. Okay, there we go. Hold on. So what I see a lot of people playing with and being really creative is, let me share some of these pictures. Let me share my screen. Is you can do stuff like this, which is at very, very fast shutter speeds. Sorry, they're a tiny bit blurry. Let me see if I can find like you could, all of this is like 1/1000, 1/2000, 1/3000. We're seeing the lines that you don't see when you look at this lake because it's freezing more motion. So we can use that to our advantage. Yeah, there's another one I know that I want to show you that's a really good example here. Da, 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 da. So even stuff like this, right? This is a very fast shutter speed. It's just reflections, but I guarantee if we were standing there and we were looking in that water, you wouldn't see all these lines like this. So sometimes we use it just to catch movement, as in literally like a hummingbird flying. But sometimes we want to get up to those very fast shutter speeds to show stuff that our eye can't see. And probably the most common use of that I see people do is reflections in water. Or let's say you're at the beach, or even if you like, if I got this glass of water and I poured it into a glass bowl and I took a picture and like everything's going to splash up, you want to see every little like globule of water. That's when you need the really fast shutter speed. You see tons of people take pictures of, I don't know, a bullet going through an apple and the apple's exploding as the bullet goes through it. At 1/4000th of a second, you're going to see much more than the human eye sees. You're going to see every little fragment of apple come out. I'll show you a visual of that just so you know what I'm talking about. And not that I'm advocating for you to shoot a bullet through an apple, but I'll show you get some pretty interesting pictures. People do it through all types of fruit. So I see people do. So let's go here. So this is fast shutter speed. 1/4000th of a second. You're seeing a moment in time that we otherwise could. This is a very famous photo that you otherwise wouldn't be able to see. Like, let's see if we
Amazing.
water drops like this. Like, look at this egg.
Mhm.
You could get someone to drop an egg, or you could drop an egg and you just smash it. And like, look at some of these. Like, people get really creative. And this is what fast shutter speed allows us to do. A common one is people dropping it in, is dropping a piece of fruit into water. Just take a glass bowl and hard to do. You really need two people. It makes it a little bit easier because you can have someone dropping it and then you're ready. But like you can see, like look at this card one. So that would be like 1/4000th of a second. So we don't see any of this with our eye. I'll show you. I'll just put fruit drop. So I see this done the whole time. Stuff like this. Water splash photos. And where you're seeing every little globule of that water. This is definitely the faster you can go, the better. Now, this is with a window light or a flash, which is probably what one of you was going to ask me, I think. Which often we need because think about it, Nancy, 1/4000th of a second, does that let in a lot of light or not much light?
Not much.
Exactly. So it's so fast. So usually we either have to be in somewhere where it's very bright to use these fast shutter speeds, or if we're doing something like this, we got to be with the thing right up against the window, or in most cases, we bring in extra light. We cheat the camera to think it's brighter than it really is to allow us to get to the 1/4000th shutter speed.
So actually, if you're doing something like this, you really want to do a series of multiple exposures and hope that you get
Correct.
one or two.
Let's be clear, not multiple exposures in terms of changing the light. All you're going to do is you're going to change your drive mode on your camera.
Okay.
Rather than be S single, you're going to change it so it's
Yes.
taking 10 frames, 20 frames a second. You back button focus, you drop the fruit, you go and you pick the best one.
Okay.
Because it's almost impossible to time it where the strawberry here is right in the perfect place in the martini glass. And that's the same as like a sports photographer. I don't know. The quarterback throws it to the running back and they go up for the catch. Like the photographer's not just going to take one picture. They're going to go and they're going to have the whole sequence of the player going up and then they're going to take the best one. But this is a really fun thing that you can just do at home. It's easy. It's literally a bowl of water or a glass. Sometimes people use glasses, and it's just dropping different colored fruits in. And you can get really interesting. Like, look at this one's really good for it to show you the water. So you see every little frozen water lodge. Or maybe I'll set this as a task for the group. This would be a good one for people to practice. But this is Susie. I was saying at the beginning when there were a few more people here that the aim of the lessons now is like we were kind of going like this on the trajectory. I'm going to accelerate it. I'm going to go more like a
Okay.
hockey stick in terms of because we were talking about how the growth theme was quite challenging. And I was like, it was intentionally challenging because I want to push this group further forward. And I don't want to say just photograph reflections because I think it's too easy for you. It's not,
Right.
I really want to make you guys think. But yeah, these water splash photographs are fun, easy to do. You've just got to make sure that you're shut. And there's tons here. Look, there's tons of interesting ones you can see. And they can really create something very, you could, and it doesn't have to be a fruit. I mean, you can drop anything in a bowl of water. It doesn't matter. You can drop a pebble. Like you see some people, if I just go water splash sunset. Some people will drop like a pebble in a pond and they'll get something like that.
Mhm.
They'll get someone to throw a rock. So that's another kind of, that's like, just make something that's really interesting and something that our human eye can't see. And that's a big advantage of going to the fast shutter speeds. The one thing that you just have to think about is you are cutting a lot of light. Anywhere between 1/1000th and 1/4000 is considered a very fast shutter speed. It's putting a lot of pressure on our camera to get light from somewhere else, which usually is either ambient light. Nancy, we put the vase that we drop, the cocktail glass that we're dropping a grape in right by your window. It's going to make life much easier than if you did it in the middle of the room. Or we can use a flash. And I don't want to go down flash too much today because I'm going to save that for another day.
Okay.
But just look at the kind of interesting pictures that people can create. This one, I doubt that is real, but if it's real, they they got very, very lucky. But I do not think that is real. Um, but and also a fun thing you can do. In fact, I've got one of my pictures. Let me show you one of my pictures here. Is a fun thing that you can do is you can also, rather than just have a plain background, like a plain black or a plain white background, often I tell people like get a piece of clothing. Like if you know you're going to drop a yellow lemon into the thing, think about what's the complementary color to yellow.
Blue.
Okay, good. So if we think about that, I'll just in fact, I'll just go to my website. I think it's probably be on here. And look at this picture there.
Mm.
Okay, that is a very simple picture. That is a very simple picture. That is just a pair of jeans underneath a glass bowl
Mm.
to give me the contrast. Sorry that it keeps on flicking. I can't pause that slideshow. But so easy to practice, easy to do, both outside and inside. I think I'll see how I think I may set that as the theme for this week. Fast, I may just call it fast shutter speeds because then we can really practice at the extreme end of the spectrum and see what it does. Good. Okay. And either of you have any questions on that? Did that will make sense?
Good.
Gave us a lot of ideas.
But yeah.
Yes.
Good, good, good. Let me come back to everyone's pictures from today. Um,
Sophie's looking at you.
hold on. Last. Okay. And let me know, guys, when you can see the screen again, please. You should be able to see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Back.
Good. Okay, so let's carry on. So Nancy, good, really good job here. But yeah, as I say, I would just take out that stem. I think it looks definitely stronger.
Yes.
That's too distracting.
Mhm.
Really nice, lovely lens baby shot here. Very nice ethereal look. Definitely fulfills the theme of growth. I'm always interested to know how a GCA, Susie may be able to advise on this as well. Like I know from some of the things I've sat in on GCA judges, sometimes they object to pictures like this because they say not sharp or
Mhm.
no definitive focal point. Now, I know whoever took this has done this on purpose. This is a specific effect that they're trying to achieve. So, whoever did this, well done. I can see what this is taken, I think, with a lens baby, which is a lens that not all of you have. So, I'm not going to dive too much into it. But essentially, it means you can manipulate the depth of field. And you can see actually the sharpest thing in this picture is actually that down there. That and kind of up here a little bit. But I think the composition is strong enough where we feel like we grow up with the flower. I would just be very interested to see how a GCA judge responded to a picture like this. I'm not saying as a right or a wrong. I like it, but I'm just giving you a red flag warning that I've seen in the past when I've sat in on these judging panels of someone throwing this out straight away because they just don't see what's happened and they just say it's a blurry image. I think they're coming round to more creative techniques as more things as like, and the technology improves because a lot of what we've done here, you can also make in the computer afterwards, but I'd much rather you get it right in camera. But really nice job. Again, Nancy, is this yours?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd what probably again, if I was working on this, I'd probably take out, and again, I don't need the generative AI here. I'd probably take out these two things at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
I just don't think they need to be here. And I need to play with it a bit more to get it looking perfect. But we've already gone over the remove tool today. So I'll just try to do it kind of quickly. But I think that having those not there, especially if I do it properly and I get rid of them if it wants to disappear. Yeah, close enough. Having those
Rid
not
of the
there,
distraction.
yeah, they're just a little bit distracting down there.
Okay.
But really nice. Do you take this in the garden?
That was that was
Really nice.
down at towards Big Sur.
Very nice. Really, really nice. Nancy, out of interest, again, for the benefit of everyone on the group, have you experienced that where you've submitted this into shows when you've
I have been afraid to submit, waste my my one choice.
yeah, on a
However,
level.
I did ask somebody who's a real strong in using a cell phone, and she said Midwest judging that if there's something a little spot that's sharp, it should be acceptable.
Mm.
But
And,
that's not what I have seen in focus, particularly in some of the just submission in the focus contest.
yeah, and as I said, like this is probably the sharpest point in this photograph, and it's probably not where the sharpest point. Like a judge would be like, why isn't it sharp up here? So, I think carry on doing what you're doing. Like we shouldn't be shooting to satisfy the needs of a judge. We
Right.
should be shooting. We should be shooting what we enjoy shooting,
Yes.
and making our own style. So, again,
And
it's
pick and choose if you submit something for
yeah,
competition.
exactly. It's more, and I want you to do the most important thing, right? Is this is meant to be fun. So I want you to do
Yes.
something that you enjoy. And generally, when you photograph stuff you enjoy and the style you enjoy, you reap better results. So really nice job. And for everyone's benefit, as I said, this is not an out of focus picture. It's just an effect that Nancy has created using this specific lens called a lens baby. Let's look at this one. This one's really interesting. This has got very hard light on it, not soft. It's almost the opposite of Nancy's that we just looked at. Very hard directional sunlight. Definitely got the theme of growth. The only thing I would say here is, and I appreciate what the person has done in that they've tried to put the flower on the bottom right nodal point and then offset it with this kind of stem going up, which I think builds on that theme of growth. The problem is, in this instance, I think I get taken up the stem and I almost don't get taken to the flower. So it's almost, especially because you've got all of this negative space here. Now, one thing whoever took this could have done is they could have shifted a little bit to their left and taken it from a bit more of an angle. That would have closed up this negative space. But with the crop that we have here, I'm highly inclined to actually make this a landscape picture and go with that as my crop.
Wow.
That still tells me growth, but it doesn't. I'll make a copy and I'll show you the difference just so you can see.
Yeah, much better.
Much better, right? We don't
Much
get
stronger.
sucked into all that negative space on the top right. Nice job, whoever took this. Really good camera settings, nice solid fast shutter speed, good f number, nice light at low ISO. In your edit, I'll just do it on this one. I would just be careful, just especially when you have a white flower. Nice little trick is just bring the highlights down just a hint. Just how
Mm,
we don't want it blown out. We just want to be able to see a little bit more detail in there. But generally very good. This is a really nice shot, and well done for seeing it in such interesting light. That's 90% of the challenge. But yeah, definitely better than this one.
yes.
Okay, back to the, so we've talked about this one already, the ostrich and the zebra. So I'll go through this quickly. But again, perfect example of two very competing subjects that don't read. But even in this one, it's kind of interesting. Like if you just took out the ostrich and you kept the zebra, I kind of like how the color on the mane and the color of the
Trees.
plants kind of tie in with each other.
Mhm.
But here I'm really torn between the two. But we already talked about the one, and let's look at this one. This one's great for growth. Nice job, whoever took this one on changing your perspective. You could have, while I was here, I probably would have done the opposite of this. I would have done two. I would have done one looking straight down, and I would have done one looking straight up. I would have got
Mm.
close to these flowers and looked up at them, especially with a wide angle lens, which has been used here. So using the wide angle lens has provided intent. This I'll do it in a different color. It's provided what we call intentional distortion. Look how all of these are like look like they're coming out. It kind of looks like it's exploding out of the frame. Looks very three-dimensional. Let's have a look at the lens that the person took this with. So yeah, they took it with a wide angle on the iPhone. If they'd taken it with the normal one on the iPhone, number one, or three, a zoom, all these flowers would have looked straighter. They wouldn't have looked, you wouldn't have got these diverging lines. So using the wide angle, and I've mentioned this before in one of the previous classes when it came to landscape photography, using the wide angle is very effective for when you want to emphasize lines. So let's say you were walking along a road and there was a big road, or you're on the beach and there's like a cool S curve running through the beach to the sunset. If you put it on the wide angle lens, or you use a wide angle lens on your camera, you are going to see those lines more. Especially a great little pro photographer's trick is when you have those lines. If I'm taking this picture this way or this way with my camera, I'll go this way so you can see. If I tilt my camera a little bit down like this, then everything in the foreground funnels up to the subject. We get this thing called, again, I'm going to share my screen just to give you let me just give you a good visual of this. Hold on. One sec. Should be able to find one here. Yeah, here we go. So, like, let me find a really good one. Here's a good one. Okay. So here you can see that these like icebergs or whatever they are, the floating ice. Look how we've got, oh, let's use red instead. Look how we've got a vanishing point. Look how the horizon is not straight, but everything brings me to that central point, which is the mountain. This is a great example of what I would call intentional distortion. And all the photographer has done is got down low and they've tilted their camera slightly towards the ground. That means all the lines feel like they're funneling away from the photographer up to the subject. Oops, there was another good one here. Um, even like this one, just with the ocean.
Did I hear you say you got down low and then angled the camera
Absolutely.
down?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
By down low, I don't mean 1 foot from the ground. You'd be about 3 feet. You just wouldn't be at eye level. So
Okay.
if we're usually at like 5 or 6 feet, I'd get you to go to like 3 feet. And again, look here, this you're starting to get, you got an S curve in this picture. You've got like, but if you're standing here and you're just looking at this with your normal human eye, we don't see any of these lines like this.
Right.
It's a landscape photographer's best friend. It's usually a wide angle lens because we can do so many creative things with it in terms of I'm trying to find some other ones here in terms of emphasizing lines. There again, look how all the craggly rocks, everything looks like it's leading towards the tree. In real life, it didn't look like that, especially these huge ones at the front. These are not that huge. It's just the wide angle lens has distorted it. And usually with a wide angle lens, anything in the center of the subject remains undistorted. And everything off to the side will create converging, diverging lines coming towards it. You saw that one in the iceberg with the mountain, and you see that one here with the tree. I've shown some of you this picture, but I'm going to show it to everyone for the benefit of the group because it's quite funny. So sometimes we've got to be great for landscapes, but it's a disaster when we use it for people. So this picture went viral when it was released. So this was a, let's see if I can get a close-up picture of it. Here we go. So this picture of the
Ooh,
Bidens and the Carters. So this went around every photography group that I'm on, and everyone was like, "How has this been released? How did they like this is doing everything that we are not meant to do?" So this is distortion from it. This is a very wide angle lens. Look at how the lamp in the middle looks fine. It's kind of like how the mountain or the tree looks fine. It's undistorted. But look at Jimmy Carter's feet. Like, look how giant Joe Biden looks and how everything's distorting through to the center of the frame. So generally, general rule of thumb is we never use this on people because you end up with a picture that looks like this. And it kind of looks like they're in Hobbit land. Like, like, like Joe Biden looks giant. Like the whole thing just looks so weird, especially the feet here. Like, look at Joe Biden's shoe. Like it's
Yeah.
his sock and his shoe are enormous. So we want to use it, but we want to use it correctly. I just
So
like
when you're saying, wide angle, how wide? 12, 14?
anytime you go below 24, I would consider that a wide angle.
Oh, okay.
So on most lenses, a lot of people are going to have 14 to 24s. Some people are going to have like 18 to 30s. But I would consider when you're moving into wide angle territory, I'll write this down for the benefit of everyone on the group. So wide angle is anything 24 millimeters and lower. Now you can buy lenses that are like 8 millimeters, 10 millimeters, but they're fisheye lenses. So those really
Yeah.
distort things. The majority of like consumer lenses that exist to help us shoot at a wide angle are somewhere between 14 to 24. Lots of people have a 14 to 24. Lots of people have a 18 prime. Like there's all different ones, but it's within this focal range.
Okay.
And within that focal range, if you point the camera down, and you can see this on your iPhone. On your iPhone, if you go to the 0.5 and you're pointing at something and then you point the camera to the iPhone down, you're going to see all the lines diverge away from you. Because for those of you who shoot a lot on your iPhone, just a reminder that zero point 0.5, look, you can see here, I think this is Suzette's, was at 4.25 millimeters. Like now, this number and this number don't directly equate to each other. So don't get confused if you shoot with your iPhone. You're like, oh my God, it was at 4 millimeters because it's not exactly the same. But it's an indicator for us that this is shot with a wide angle lens. And this is really good. Filling the frame. There's nothing distracting here. I really like the flow of it. So it's a nice job. Did either of you have any questions on the wide angle stuff just before I move on?
no.
Okay, good.
Mm-mm.
So here's reflections. Really interesting. Not sure whether it fulfills the theme of growth, maybe growth coming up from the pillars. I think it needs to be slightly straighter. It needs a slight, so to straighten it, I go to crop as a reminder. I just hover outside of the box and then I just drag up or down. You can also do it with the slider here if you prefer. There's a slider. I'll get rid of the text here so you can see. And to get rid of the text, sometimes this is in the way. It's Command I for information. So if I hit Command I, it disappears. Again, I just like to write things down for people so they can see. So Command plus I equals hide or reveal info. Now, I like to have that on most of the time, but a lot of the time, like in this case, it's getting in the way. I can't see the edges of my frame. So I just hit Command I. For those of you on a PC, it's Control. PC is Control I. Apple is Command I. Pretty much anytime I say Command, it's Control on a PC, unless I tell you otherwise. So this one's really interesting. Really interesting. Again, I almost feel like I'd want this to go more abstract. I'd want to take I think we could just go in on these lines, this like zigzaggy pattern. Um, rather than I don't think we've shown the whole thing, but we've still got a lot to look at here. It's kind of the same as the one we saw of the growth with the stem. But I think this is Really nice, good capture. Make sure whoever you took it, that remember you do the one, this is taken on an iPhone, 1, 2, 3 hold, just to make sure you really set the focus on the iPhone, which I'm not sure has been done here from looking at it. Um, but but generally very good. This one's lovely. Really good. Now, again, if I put my judging hat on here, I'd be like, do I like this yellow bit behind? Is that distracting me from the focal point? Maybe. How could I have got rid of that? I could have just moved. So if the photographer had just moved a little bit to the right and dropped maybe half a foot, this would be completely blocking that. And I think that would have been better. Because especially because this is bright, this is where we want to go. And it's just competing a little bit. In terms of composition, filling the frame, not showing the whole flower, central focal point, really nice. Again, like maybe in this one we could even have, because the focal point's kind of in the center, but not quite in the center. You could have even offset it and done something like that. Maybe you could have gone the other way, so feel like it's growing into the frame, and you could have done something like this. Just giving you ideas. Could also have cropped it. Remember, we always wanted to do portrait, and you could have started like playing around with tilting it, even if I actually tilt it this way, and created something really interesting like that. Kind of looks like I don't know what it looks like.
So
Something.
in that framing, then you probably will, because you'd have to have a smaller aperture to get the inside of the flower versus the petal.
Are you saying if you wanted to get more depth?
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
I'm sitting here looking at the yellow and going, it's not sharp. I mean, this is mine, so I could, um, but if you focused on the center of the flower,
even if you're
um,
focused here or here or here or here or here, I still think the yellow is distracting.
Mhm.
Because even though it's blurry in the background, it's still, because it's so bright, it's pulling my attention. And I think it literally, when I say Nancy, a little movement, it's like going from here to there. I mean, it would have been maybe a couple of inches you move to your right, and this would have disappeared. Um, again, that's
probably
me.
have one. That was the whole series I did after seeing the Irvin Penn exhibit with
Yeah.
all the dead flowers.
And it's a great capture, really good. But can you see how the yellow is a little bit
Yes,
distracting? And that comes back to like a general theme that you'll hear me talk about again and again, no matter whether I'm teaching a group of professionals or whether I'm teaching a group of beginners, is as much as we can, we always want to pay attention that we have non-distracting backgrounds behind our focal points. And in this case, even Nancy, to be honest, if the yellow was like down here somewhere, it would still probably, I'd comment on it, but it wouldn't be
it's
as,
strong.
yeah, it's just that it's right there. Is taking us away from it. Now, you could even just like, I was going to say you could brush it and just tone it down, but or even take out that. I'm just going to do a quick brush over it. And if you made it darker, but I still think you could even try to change the color of it, but it's not going to work very well.
I could probably find a better one.
Yeah, have a look. But nice, really nice capture with your macro lens. And can you remember whether this was on a tripod? It looks like it was.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, good. Because your shutter speed is slow enough where it has to be on a
Yeah,
tripod.
and this was inside.
Yeah, really good. The lighting's lovely. Let's look at this one for growth. Well done, whoever did this. Changing your perspective. Wide angle lens gives us those. Look, this is exactly what we looked at for the landscape photography. The trees in real life don't bend like this, but we've intentionally distorted everything to bring us to this central focal point. Again, I'd be very interested to whoever took this to know if you took a landscape version of it, because I
Oh,
think that, especially this way, you could then start experimenting and saying, I don't need all this negative space up here. What happens if I go like that? kind of reminds me, I don't know what it reminds. It looks like a couple of rocket ships taking off. But can you see how straight away that's something interesting and abstract, and you look at it and you think, more than the conventional way of just having it growing up. I see people photograph trees like this the whole time. Really, really good. Very well done, whoever took this. Let's look at this one.
Interesting.
Really interesting. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, it's leaves on something, but I'm not sure what the leaves are on. But you've clearly got all this strong texture. Another point that you hear me remind people of, watch the edges of the frame. So I think there on the bottom right-hand corner, that could have been cropped out when you took the picture or even afterwards. And then it's like, what am I looking at here? Like, there's so many interesting things. And I would actually make an argument that the more I look at this, I don't know, do you guys get sucked into the middle there?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. But I actually think the most interesting part is the bits that are peeling up here and up here, not the flat part. I mean, it's interesting. Like this one, I kind of see it looks almost like some type of animal. Look, there's his eye. Um, Here's the head. It almost looks like some type of dog, like a sausage dog. Um, but can you, but yeah, I read way too many kids' stories of my kids, so my imagination is like all over the place. But here I think that again, like I'd be looking and I'd be like, that's the interesting part.
Yes. Oh, look at that.
Like
Mm-hmm.
so much better. And again, then I'd be like with that, well, maybe I want to start tilting my camera and creating something like where it feels like it's growing up. Like maybe I go to the bit at the top, which also is really interesting with this like peeling leaf, whatever it is, of it almost looks like it's a peeling leaf on a pavement or on a roof. I'm not sure what it is.
It's on a tree.
Oh, it's yours, Susie. Great.
Yes. It's
Um,
it's a
and can you see though, Susie, how we get kind of sucked to that bit in the middle?
yes.
It almost feels like to me this picture that it's two photographs chopped in half. It
Mm-hmm.
almost feels like there's a picture up here and there's a picture up here.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Susie, don't be afraid, especially when you do abstract stuff like this, tight crops. Don't be afraid to twist your camera,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
turn it and
That's a good
rotate it.
point.
And often even this, whether an iPhone or a camera, doesn't matter, but often even the smallest tilt can make a dramatic difference. Okay. So play around with that. But nice job. Um, yeah, now I really see that animal in the middle. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is an interesting interpretation of growth. Um, it's good because we never see, not many people submit portrait or pictures with humans in them. So one thing that I will say here is I think, well, I'm going to actually ask the group. Nancy, where does your eye go here?
Well, I think it goes to her hat or crown, whatever that is,
Yeah, it's like a
because
Christmas.
it's against the white cabinetry.
What about yours, Susie?
Well, I guess after I notice them, my eye immediately goes to the left and that
Yes.
distracting.
Yeah,
Um,
the microwave and everything over there
yeah.
and everything over there. I agree. So the first thing I would have done is I would have said, okay, we need to crop out all the junk.
Mm-hmm.
So by cropping out all the junk straight away, we've got a stronger picture.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I probably would have done here, if I was taking the picture, is I would have dropped slightly lower. Now,
Mm-hmm.
by me dropping slightly lower, not only would I have made them feel bigger, that feeling of growth, but I would have eliminated this behind them because their heads would have been covering it. So the whole frame would have just been filled by these two individuals, like up against each other, thinking about growth. Hopefully that makes sense. Just by dropping lower, their heads would come up here. And I think that would lead to a stronger image. But nice interpretation of the growth by whoever took this. Well done for this is really thinking out the box. I don't know whether this is like a mum and her kid, and they're basically this is saying the kid's grown bigger than the mum, but it's a storytelling picture, which is good, which is what we want to do. Let's look at this one. Now this one looks like when I looked at this last night, this one looks like it's been edited and it's been edited a lot. Susie, is this yours?
Yes, I put a I put a textured background on it.
Hmm. So I like the effect, but I think be careful because sometimes, and then it's like you see like this kind of stuff up here, there's
Mm-hmm.
random blue splotches, which has obviously come
Mm-hmm.
from the background you've put behind it, and you can actually also see it a little bit here on the web. That we want to be careful of because this to
Ah,
me looks like a mistake. This looks like
okay.
something that happened and we put a filter on and we put a background on, we over edited it and we forgot to get because there shouldn't be these blue splodges in the picture.
Yes, I
And
didn't even notice that until
that's
now.
that's okay. And then and again on this one I'd be thinking, I really like what you've done, but what happens if we like offset the
Mm,
crop? We don't need
yes.
that black space. Even I could make this like really like I love this web on the right hand side, like all of this leading. Can you see the blue dots now running along
Mm-hmm.
the web? So just be careful. And also, Susie, just what did you how did you drop in the texture background? What did you use?
I just took a colored texture background, put it in Photoshop, and blended it. And actually, I think it's multiply.
Yeah, perfect. So you change the blending mode, and
Mm-hmm.
that often creates these like abstract, interesting things. Like for example, like we've lost the spider web there, like we've
Mm-hmm.
lost the web here. I'm not saying that's a bad thing because you're being creative, but I want you to be conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's happened. Because again, like putting my judging hat on, someone may say, what's happened here? They
Yes.
accidentally removed something. They cloned it out. They forgot to put it back in. And I think I like the effect, but I think what you could have done, Susie, just an idea is when you blend the layers together, I think you could have reduced the opacity,
Capacity, yes.
yeah, of the textured layer, which would have made sure that you'd brought back all of this and also would have made this blue less obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Also, that multiply one notoriously makes things look more artistic. Like there's other ones that's like overlay, hard light, soft light, vivid light. For everyone's benefit on the group, we're talking about how layers can blend together in Photoshop. Again, I think this is something we'll get to. But yeah, Susie, I would just be
Good
conscious as you're
call.
doing
Yeah.
these and use that opacity to refine
Mm.
the change. That's the key. Choose the blending mode first and then use the opacity. But really nice capture. I mean, it's beautiful. It almost looks like a chandelier. Like it doesn't even look like a spider web. It's the
Yeah.
color and detail. And amazing that you got this on an iPhone, which just shows you the quality that you can capture on the iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
This one's very nice. Nancy, this is yours. Watch out for
Yes.
that little green stem on the left. And Nancy, this is exactly what we were talking about when we're using the remove tool. This would be the perfect one where I'd be like, I don't like this tiny little splodge here. And I'm just gonna and I'm just gonna and I'm just gonna take it out.
Okay.
And it's that quick, you see? But I like it. I really and Nancy, I'm really interested when you do use your lens, baby, you always seem to photograph in a portrait orientation most of the time. A lot of the
Actually, I
time.
think this may be cropped.
Cropped from a landscape picture, you think?
Yes.
Okay. Because I was going to say, don't be afraid to change it. And also, don't be afraid to just like show like a really abstract and like just show like, I know you don't show, but it's not really going to work here because I don't have the pixels to play with. Let me see if I spin it this way.
Mm.
No, I prefer the one you had.
I think what I was trying to show was kind of the eaten away petals.
Mm, this was in your Irving pen.
No, this was down at Big Sur workshop.
Yeah, it's really nice. The one thing again to think about is like the background and the non-distracted background. Is this random bit of red and brown at the top a little bit distracting? Maybe, I'm not sure what that was. Maybe it was a path, maybe it was a rock, maybe it was a road. But again, thinking about really nailing in on trying to get those non-distracting backgrounds. Um,
Okay.
but excellent, really good, really, really nice shot, and definitely in with growth. This one's interesting as well.
Yes.
This one's lovely. Repetitive pattern. Remember, we love repetitive pattern. It's that Gursky-esque. Again, here, I think the subject is a little too much in the middle. Look, it's right there. on the horizon. So I would be offsetting this a little bit more. As a reminder to everyone, I just went to the crop and I'm just using O on my keyboard to flick through these crop overlays. And again, here, I think like this wants to be on the top, maybe the top right, maybe it wants to be on the bottom left somewhere, growing up. Kind of hard. I don't have enough to work with. But even this picture, to be honest, without just the lily pads is interesting. But in terms of fulfilling the theme of growth, just seeing who, okay. So if you look really closely at this picture, whoever took it, you'll see that it's slightly blurry. Okay. The reason it's slightly blurry is because the shutter speed has not come up with the focal length.
Mm.
So this is telling me that the camera is zoomed in, that the shutter speed, remember, shutter speed greater than 1 over the focal length. This is telling me the shutter speed really to avoid camera shake should be 1/185 or faster. And here it's 1/80th. It's too slow. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing camera shake. You're seeing the person's hand moving. Now you could take 5 of these and maybe 1 would be sharp, just by luck. But I want you to take 5 out of 5 and be sharp. So just remember when you zoom more in, especially with a camera, not an iPhone, you have to compensate with your shutter speed. Your shutter speed has got to come up, get faster, because the camera is sticking more out away from you and there's more room for it to wiggle. That makes sense?
Mhm.
But otherwise, really nice picture. And then last one for today is this one. This is a great full frame picture. This one would look really good in black and white because you've got such strong light, especially if you start like bringing more light maybe into the person's face. This is a radial filter I'm using here, but we started like brightening up their face, and because that's really where I want the person to go. Add texture, add a bit of a tone curve. Even just doing that, I just shifted the light onto their face, as well as onto the top of their head. But what we've got here is I'll put it back into color, is we've got a really nice rim light. Not sure about the exposure on the bottom here. Again, I'd probably just work on that a little bit. We could use a radial or we could use a linear gradient and just see if we could take down the highlights a little bit, just so it's not quite so, I'd use the expression in photography, hot, which just means not quite so overexposed. Maybe I don't even need to see. I'm going to unconstrain the crop here. Maybe I don't even need to see what this person's holding. Maybe I just need to go in on the head and the arms like that.
I debated to whether to show the baby in her arms or not, and decided that I didn't. But I think I used a radial for more the chest there, in that dark area.
Yeah, you may well have done. But I think you have to think you're using the masks on any picture to help draw the viewer's attention to where you want it to go.
Okay.
And in this case, I think where we wanted it to go, like when I look at this now, I kind of go to the baby and I go to the top of the head.
They're the brightest.
Yeah, exactly. And simply by putting on a radial filter here, and look, I slid up the exposure, I took down the highlights, I increased the shadows. I could even drop the blacks and increase the whites a little bit to create a bit more dynamic range in there. If I put on a little tone curve, increase the texture. And now and again, I could do the opposite up here. I could take the edge off this bit.
Okay.
And now when we look at it,
Much better. Really
yes,
see the face.
yeah. And that's where we want to go here, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Like that's the interest, that's the focal point. Usually on anything with a face, we want to get drawn into the eyes rather than drawn into the top of the head or the baby. So yeah, very good. I feel like we covered a lot today. A lot of different removing. I'm going to surmise. Covered how to remove things in Lightroom. We did a lot of work at the beginning on sizing, talking about how to size things appropriately, how to meet GCA requirements, exporting as JPEGs, exporting as TIFFs, constraining crops. Susie, you can go back and watch the video on the
Yes.
recordings that we talked about at the beginning. I really like the idea of simply giving you guys as a theme fast shutter speeds. That's it. Because that means you can get super creative if you want to get really creative, or you can just take a picture of a dandelion blowing in the wind. Here's an idea. Get someone to hold a dandelion and blow on it and take a picture with a fast shutter speed and see what happens. For example, you're going to see every little bit come off. And I want you to experiment with the faster shutter speeds. Um, I'm hoping next time we have, this was because I think there wasn't much time between. A lot of people are traveling. Hopefully we get back to our normal kind of group size for the next class. We've got 9 people signed up. There's just 3 people who couldn't continue. So hopefully we'll be back to a group setting for next time, which is before I start recording, let me confirm. So it is so we've got this week, and then it
The
is
12th, Wednesday, the 12th.
Wednesday the 12th. Perfect. Good. So it's next. So this time basically next week, we've got just under a week. So again, an ask for everyone, please, if you can, send your pictures to me, not the morning of the lesson. Please try and send it, then I have to scramble. But yeah, if you can send, even the night before is fine. It gives me a chance to actually put them into a presentation and go forward. Let me